Let's go ahead, bring to order this meeting of Templeton Community Services District Board of Directors. Today is March 17th, and it's 2026, and it's 6:30. Roll call, please.
Director Spardonish.
Here.
Logan. Here. Wilkinson.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
And Tucker. Here.
All 5 board members are here. We have a quorum. And let's please stand for pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please have a seat. Order of business. Do any of the board members would like to change the order of business? Okay. Special reports, and we only have Templeton Unified School District. Hello.
Hello.
How are you? Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Cheryl Parks on the Templeton School District Board. We are in full swing developing our budget for the coming school year, and that's a lot of work that has to be done in anticipation of adopting a budget in June. Just wanted to note that we do have declining enrollment in our schools, that is not unique to Templeton. It is countywide, statewide, so just not enough babies being born. So right now, this year, we have about 2,210 students. We're projecting a decrease of 48 students for next year and another 29 students the following year. And then a steady decline. At last week's board meeting, we looked at paving our parking lot at the high school. If you've driven in that parking lot lately, you know it's filled with divots, and my car is not going in that parking lot for that reason. So to pave that parking lot is probably going to cost about $1 million. So we're not looking at paving it right now. We are looking at bringing in some more class 2 road base and grading it to help with the drainage, so that maybe will give us another few years before then we'll have to start looking at what really makes sense. So that's the plan right now. We did approve last week to add a boys and girls wrestling at the high school. You may or may not know that last year we added wrestling at the middle school, and it's hugely popular with the kids. We have about 50 students at the middle school, boys and girls, that are wrestling. So it only makes sense that we extend that to the high school. And then we've also had a huge interest in girls flag football. Apparently that is a new sport at the college level. So girls are interested in doing it and getting in on kind of the ground floor at colleges and universities. So that wasn't an easy decision. We kind of wrestled with it, so to speak, sorry, for a while. There's a lot to consider: the cost of putting on a sport, from the facilities, from transportation to coordinating practices with meets and the other sports that we already have going on. So it took us a while to decide that yes, we can actually do this. So we'll see how that goes. We also, at our second meeting in February, we approved a contract to build 10 new classrooms at VES. That, if you're familiar with that campus, it's the H wing. So if you come in where the administration building is, you got the MPR on the right. It's that wing that is over to the right side. And those are all original classrooms. So whether we swap the campuses or not, that is something that has to happen. So we're putting 10 new stick-built classrooms. They're not going to be portable, so they should have a good, healthy life to them. We are also replacing the classrooms that are at TES that are between the baseball field and the administration building. Those are also original classrooms. So there will be 4 new classrooms going in there now. Same contractor that's going to do both of those projects. It's about $10 million roughly for both of those projects to get them done. Next Tuesday, we have a study session on the bond, and that's when we expect to make a decision on whether we are swapping the campuses. And on a side note, I actually toured the ag facility at the high school today. And I was actually working for the district when that facility opened in 1997. And it is in serious need of some upgrades. So we'll be talking about that next week as well. The Performing Arts Center is going to be repainted. We approved that contract with Browder, which I noticed that they've got a new facility over here on Main Street. So that's going to be taking place, I think, during spring break, but we'll see. And a different topic, artificial intelligence. I don't know how much you guys are in the know about AI, but it's a big thing. There's a lot to consider when you talk about using it in the schools. Age appropriateness, what you use it for. So we are planning some structured sessions with our staff because staff needs to be educated in how it works and how to use it and how not to use it. So they're going to be doing that with staff, students, and parents coming up in April, and I don't have a date on that. But yeah, I recently, a situation in LA occurred where a 4th grade teacher gave an assignment to her students to do a report on Pippi Longstocking and then to use AI to create a cover for their book report. And unfortunately, AI took it places where you wouldn't want your 4th graders seeing it. So it's something that teachers need to know how to use it. And I'm sure that was an innocent assignment, but that's how it can go wrong. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on in Templeton schools. So any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Public, any questions? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Great. Public comment. Members of public may address the board on any items of interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, but not on the agenda today. In compliance with the Brown Act, the board cannot discuss or act on items not on the agenda. Any public comment that's not on the agenda? Okay, go ahead, please.
I'm Bill Nowinski. I'm a part of the Templeton Ranch Homeowners Association. The way the property over there where the association is located, it consists of, the first part is single family homes, which are on 4 streets that the contractor built and then deeded to the county. At our last meeting, the board decided to put a stop sign on one of these streets. And I'm just wondering, are they authorized to put stop signs on county roads? Or does,
The
you know,
HOA board decided
Huh?
to do it? The HOA board decided to do that?
yeah, the HOA board decided to do that, and they're gonna,
On a
so they're
public
gonna have
road?
someone come in, put in the stop signs and paint the street with stop.
And it is a public road, right?
Yeah, it's a public, yeah, it was, huh? Are they authorized?
So, Templeton CSD doesn't have jurisdiction of roads, public or private. I can tell you that if those roads were accepted for maintenance by the county, then the answer is gonna be no. I would get confirmation from County Public Works.
Okay, so-
I also have some concerns if the county approved the development with a certain traffic pattern, and even if the roads are not maintained by the county, you might have some difficulty altering the traffic controls.
Okay, yeah, so we'd have to, so usually just to contact Public Works.
County Public Works.
Okay, because they said they're gonna put in, put in stop signs, paint the road and, so, okay. I just wanted to get clarification on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, we'll go ahead to our consent agenda. The following items are considered routine and non-controversial by staff. So we on consent agenda, we have the minutes from the February 17th, 2026 We have the treasurer's report for January 2026. We also have resolution number 03-2026, which is SLO County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. Next is adoption of ordinance number 2026-1, which is the Civil Administrative Penalty Program. And lastly, actually not lastly, is a budget, the next one is budget amendment, which is the new fire engine, equipment items in the amount of 152,500. Lastly is the budget amendment, which is self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA's, in the amount of $110,000. Any of the board members would like to pull any of the items for discussion? No, any public, need to pull any of these items? No, okay. I'll bring it back to board. If there's no, comments or, discussion, then I would like to, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion that the board approve the consent agenda. Can I just items A through F?
All right, great, thank you.
second the motion.
Great, roll call, please.
Directors Tyrone,
Aye.
Logan,
Aye.
Mortensen,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
and Fardonish.
Aye. Okay. Next is our ad hoc committee, which is the review, discuss, and direct staff and control committee regarding the 7 specific recommendations to address the expected deficit in the fire fund.
Sure, I'll outline this, but your committee members are obviously here and should, if there are any questions about the committee's, recommendations, the committee members could also answer those questions. So, you may recall just a month ago, the board president, formed an ad hoc committee, with himself and Vice President Tyrone to serve on the committee, to examine and address, the expected deficit of the fire fund. Particularly following the recent decision to maintain the 2 what were safer footed fire engineer positions, which was expected to increase the budget deficit going forward. The ad hoc committee met twice, March 2nd and March 9th. During those meetings, they reviewed the original Measure A 10-year financial model that was developed prior to Measure A going on the ballot, so that's about 7 years ago. The 2025 fire fund draft, fiscal year 2026-27 budget forecast. These are also attached, but this was the same budget forecast that was presented to the board or included in your packet in January. Reviewed the most recent from last month, actually, property tax estimate for SLO County that includes specific forecasts for all the agencies within the county for fiscal year 26-27. And an October 2025 Parks, Recreation, and Solid Waste Fund analysis that was requested by the board originally, included in your goals, but reviewed with the Parks, Recreation, and Refuse Committee last fall. After those reviews, the committee drafted or developed 7 specific recommendations. Some are more related to one another than others. And I'll just highlight them quickly and then try to answer any questions that you may have or the committee members may as well. The recommendations are beginning with fiscal year 26-27 budget, freeze the amount of solid waste franchise fee revenue for Parks, Recreation, and Solid Waste Fund to the amount that was originally anticipated for fiscal year 25-26, which happened to be $253,400, and transfer any remaining amounts to the fire fund. This amount for next fiscal year is preliminarily estimated to be about $35,000 and would grow over time. It would grow, all the growth would then end up going to the fire fund. So if it grows approximately, even if we have about a 3% growth in that fund, about $10,000 a year of growth would come to the fire fund. So the following year, just real rough math, might be something like $45,000. Item number 2, to help offset the loss of the solid waste franchise fees as revenue to the Parks, Recreation, and Solid Waste Fund, increase all registration and rental fees for recreation programs and facilities Examples include youth soccer, out-of-district surcharges, rec center rentals. Those are just some examples. By a minimum of 10% per year for the next 3 years, beginning with the next program that is yet to open for registration and any rentals that have not yet paid. Item number 3, eliminate the consideration of funding the recycling grant for fiscal year 26-27 and beyond. You may recall that historically we've allocated $10,000 a year to this, although there isn't any funding for the current fiscal year. And our estimate is if these first 3 are all implemented, it's anticipated that the result will be the loss of 1 full-time position in the Parks, Recreation, and Solid Waste Fund. Likely the currently vacant Parks Maintenance Worker position, which we would recommend be replaced with a part-time position should sufficient funding remain available. And that would again actually essentially occur immediately if these are tackled or if we're directed to implement them. Item number 4, that the Parks, Recreation, and Refuse Committee should examine any opportunities to increase parent and volunteer involvement with all recreation programs with the goal of gaining efficiency as it relates to staff time and effort. With such programs, efficiencies gained can result in both broadening recreation services provided to the community, as well as supporting needed fundraising efforts. Item 5, pause all efforts and expenditures associated with the current plans to expand the fire station until such time as the fire fund is forecasted to support the expected increase in asset replacement contribution that would be tied to the expansion, which is based on the cost or the investment made in the expansion. If it's $2.5 million, it would be about $62,500 in increased asset replacement contributions. In the meantime, consider interim measures to resolve highest priority needs, including adding a restroom and relocating turnout lockers. Target a budget of no more than $250,000 for such interim improvements. Item number 6, it's recognized that both the Fire Fund and Parks, Recreation, and Solid Waste Fund will likely be at a deficit in the near future and expected to remain so absent additional revenue and or reductions to expenditures. The district should consider whether or not additional fundraising for both funds can be a sustainable source of revenue. If it's determined that it can be, 1 or more new annual fundraising events should be planned to be held to raise money for both Parks and Recreation and Fire. And then finally, not later than 2029, a new ad hoc committee should be formed to review the results of any implemented recommendations contained herein and determine if further action is needed going forward. Anyhow, since the ad hoc committee had developed these recommendations, they wished that this be discussed by the board right away, so that any of the recommendations that there's consensus to move forward with can be implemented with as soon as possible, including with the budget, the fiscal year 26-27 budget, which is planning for that is already underway. So again, I'm happy to try to answer questions, but really your committee members who serve in the ad hoc committee are here and are probably better equipped to do so.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff, for helping us with this, as well as Natalie and Justin for being at the meetings. Appreciate that. Let's just start with the board members, I guess. Any questions?
Well, I have a couple questions. I'm looking at the Park and Recreation budget, and for 2025-26, Park and Rec component for overtime is $9,066. There's nothing under the rec program, but yet the salary is split between the 2 areas. So is all overtime just getting charged to Park and Rec, and no overtime is being incurred under the rec program component?
So when you say you're looking at the budget, you're looking at this analysis that was
The handout that was
yes.
included in the package.
So the overtime is primarily due to opening the parks on weekends.
And we pay overtime for that?
Yes, we don't have any staff members who the staff members that work on weekends are on overtime rate of pay. We have a utility operator that works an on-duty shift or we call it an on-call shift. It's like a 3 or 4 hour shift in the morning on Saturdays, Sundays and holidays. And part of their duty is to open the parks, unlock the restrooms, stock them, to take any trash out, et cetera.
So it's really a chargeback then from the water department.
I mean, they code
But
the
that's
time,
their staff that's actually performing this.
yes.
And because they're performing it after their normal work hours, it's being
Well-
charged as overtime.
All the time that those folks work is paid at overtime. Regardless of what activity they perform. That's the district's personnel guidelines essentially say they're paid, the on-call pay is paid at the overtime rate.
So are they being, I still don't understand, and it may be just a technicality here. Cause I look at overtime is someone has already incurred their 40 hours. And now any extra hours is being charged at, for a non-exempt employee, is time and a half overtime. So what I'm hearing is that this is actually the water staff that is performing this service for the park and rec. And because it's after their normal shift, it's being incurred as overtime. Is that correct?
That's correct in a general sense, but our personnel guidelines are more specific and state that even if somebody hadn't worked, let's say they took a day off or there was a holiday during that pay period, on-call duty is paid at overtime rate, time and a half rate, whether it's over 40 hours or not. That's been a district practice for decades.
Okay. All right,
But
and so
that-
and
you're right, that's
because
correct.
it's the opening and closing, that's all they're doing is opening and closing the
Just,
park.
it's actually
falling under Parks
it's
and Rec.
actually just opening. And this would be the bulk of it, the bulk of those costs. But the reason they were attributed to facilities is because that's where those folks were going. So we close nightly. We have a separate employee that isn't working overtime, that closes the parks at dusk or later every night. So that's the skate park, German Park and Evers Park. And our utility, who's ever on call.
Yeah.
Would open those facilities, could check the restrooms, stock any toilet paper or other paper or other products. And ensure that the parks are usable for the day.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's my only question so far.
Thank you.
I have other comments.
Any other questions? Okay, all right. Public, any questions from public? That's so far from what you heard. Anything online? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board for comments and discussion. There's a lot to unpack here, so I guess we could start.
Should we take one of these individually and vote on them individually rather than a
Well, I mean,
packet?
it is a package type of thing because
Yeah, but there's,
yes, because I mean, at least the goal of the committee was to try to ensure as far as fire is concerned, that we go beyond 2030, go to, our goal was to get to 2035. So that was our goal. So, I mean, it is, and I've thought about that, trying to look at it individually, but they're kind of like, as you said, they build on each other or connected to each other. But I mean, I guess we could discuss them separately and then we'll see where we go from there.
Okay.
Rather than maybe, I'd rather, in terms of voting on it, wait a little bit after, maybe we have to discuss a little bit further. But,
This is, excuse me, but this is not the vote on anyways for discussion and direction.
it could be voted, yeah, it could,
So-
it give
Actually-
direction, so we would give direction and then basically it would affect the budget. So as they.
they're being developed.
Yeah, I think each of these, like, for example, when you look at item number 1, that the formal determination would be part of the budget adoption, although it would be helpful to know whether or not this is something you'd like us to implement so we can plan the budget accordingly. But you wouldn't formally be approving this until the budget were adopted because it's effective 26,
But you
27.
need to put it into
We need
the
to-
budget that's currently being drafted.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to do that after the fact, or a little harder to do that after the fact. The other items could begin earlier. For example, under item number 2, the way it's drafted, that actually could start sooner. I believe the next sport that we haven't yet opened for registration is flag football. And so if you made a decision on item number 2 tonight, we could actually implement that as soon as the flag football registration opens. I believe.
April 1, so.
So, yeah, so the first item, obviously, is regarding the franchise fee that we received from the solid waste. And that is currently for the 25-26 budget was 253,400. So we recommended to freeze it at that level, and anything additional to go to the fire fund. And we're hoping with that amount, with the growth, that would help offset some of the costs that are, we are going to have because we went to the full-time engineers. One thing, that was another thing. We did look at a lot of options. My hope was to try to eliminate any deficit, but in doing so, like if you wanted to eliminate the deficit for the fire department, right now it would hurt the parks department too much. So we were hoping that by being only and eliminating the amount that we are doing right now, there's still going to be a deficit of approximately $25,000 for fire fund, but we have enough savings where it could allow us to continue to operate efficiently till 2035. And then what's going to happen over the next 3 years as we raise the funds, the fees for the parks, for the rec programs, we see how that's going to work out. Because I know there's going to be a fine balance between kids being able to play at a certain point in terms of price point. So we just have to see how that would work out. Our hope is by having a 10% over the next 3 years, that kind of softens the blow rather than doing it immediately. But that being said, I think if we are able to continue to if we're able to do that for the rec program, that's going to help quite a bit in terms of offsetting some of the deficit that they have with the rec program.
Well, I think that's the issue, because right now for the rec programs alone, there's a $92,000 deficit. So there's, a shortage of $92,000 in revenue versus what those programs cost. So based on this attachment that was included in the packet, so that's an issue. And I don't want to jump ahead, but that 10% increase isn't going to close that deficit.
It's probably not going to eliminate it, but again, it's going to cut that down. Again, it's one of those things that, we have to be I understand what the issue is in terms of the fire fund and what's happening with parks, but we have to take this slowly. And then in 2029, we could revisit this again and see where that is. But I'm hoping if everything goes as planned, maybe that 92,000 could be cut, will be cut down to 45 maybe. So there's still going to be a deficit.
So let me ask this, is there any fundraising planned for the Parks and Rec Department? I know in years past, there has been a lot of fundraising activities. So, and I know some of those activities were absorbed by TRF.
Well, and yeah, they did a lot of work to help facilitate the fundraisers. So there would be like a 50-50 sort of, shared revenue stream from those fundraisers. But I think we're looking at taking back the dinner and auction, so that TRF doesn't get anything from it, frankly, and operating it ourselves again. We'll see what levels of success we have with that. So.
Well, and I think that's an excellent idea, because I think that since TRF had taken over that fundraiser, it seemed like it started to diminish. And I think there's been problems with TRF having enough people to serve on that board to make some of those events happen successfully. So I think there was far more success when you and your team had actually been in control of that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you raised the fundraiser issue, and I think, I'm glad that you're thinking about that, and, I think, long-term, we should look at fundraisers as a source of revenue. And, I think both of us, though, we felt like we don't wanna put the burden just on Parks and Rec, and
Well,
I
I
know
think she can
fire,
rely upon this board too.
pardon me?
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
I think we want to think holistically, because like the deficit doesn't just affect one department, it affects the entire district.
But I think what's,
And so what I mean is by that is, when we talk about fundraising, one of the things we want to do is create some efficiency within the Parks Department so that they have some capacity to do fundraising, but we'd also like to see some joint ventures maybe between the fire department and the Parks Department.
well, I think
because the
historically, it's been the Park and Rec
Right.
Department that's done the fundraisers. It then transitioned to TRF. And that was, in my opinion, a disaster. And then we saw TRF not willing to, I think, give back some of that, or we're less than successful with, I think, the last big event that they did. And that's the concern. But I also want to mention is that when the district was formed, I've been told by a number of long-term, I guess, employees or former employees here with the district, that when the district was formed, it was not formed with having parks. So that's come about after the fact, after our property tax has been determined by the county, which was only really supporting fire. And over time, it's expanded to, oh, now we have parks, now we have rec programs, where we've been able to do that, but I think we're finding that we're being pinched between fire and between park and rec. But I want people to remember that originally it was just the fire department. That's what this property tax covered, was the fire department.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we're in a position where we'd like to maintain as many services as we
I
as we
agree.
can. And I think that's why Naveed and I were sort of trying to say that if you think about this document building upon one another, we are shifting, on the back end, some of the financial accounting from the solid waste from parks to fire. But then we're hoping, yes, the deficit that we have in parks probably will not be mitigated by that 10% alone, but we're hoping that we improve the efficiencies and sort of gather a little bit more of that volunteer core for Parks and Rec, that staff will be able to dedicate some more time to fundraising. And that should also help to close that gap a little bit.
So how much money are we looking at with the 10% increase?
Well, it varies sport by sport.
Well, but assuming that we have the same number of people sign up,
Yeah.
do we know what the dollar that we're
Well-
shooting for with a 10% increase?
Well, I would, I thought based on the numbers that we've seen, we have maybe about, correct me if I'm wrong, about 1,500 kids that sign up for all the sports if you add them all together, or is it less?
In total, that's probably pretty accurate.
So if it's 1,500 and 10% would be right now about $20. So 1,500 times 20, it would be $30,000. So if everyone signs up, I think that's, that could be, that could work out,
Substantial.
especially over 3 years. We could actually get to the $90,000. But that being said, I think, we just have to see how the kids, how the parents respond. But also, I think this is where, and I'm glad Chelsea is on the TRF now, and where they could maybe strengthen the communications with the parents and strengthen their scholarship programs, where they make sure that some of that money, the fundraisers that they're doing, that it goes back to the parent, the kids that can't afford it. So that hopefully that could be important. And then just going back to the fundraisers real quick, again, as I was saying, I don't want that burden just only on the Parks Department. Fire Department, I know they historically have done some fundraisers, but a lot of that money goes to the association. And the association basically chooses how they want to spend the money. And for example, we got the UTV just recently, which was nice, but it would be nice if we had a little bit more control in terms of the fundraiser revenue that comes in. So I think if Parks and the Fire Department, fire staff could, put their, combine their strangers together and have a nice fundraiser. Even, for example, the volunteer dinner that we had, where the kids could get a ride, or somebody could get a ride on the fire truck. I mean, that was a successful event that they had. So I mean, I think if they could work together, that would be nice, but so that way they could help the parks, because I know Mel has the networking, and she knows that this town,
Yeah, I know she's good with the fundraising, but let me make sure, you're not suggesting that the fire department do its own fundraising for additional revenue?
Well, I'm hoping that they could combine with the parks and the fire department combine together to try to come up with an event that they could do a fundraiser for. Or maybe fire department could help the parks. It's one of those things that I think it's important for us, as you mentioned, Chelsea. We have to look at this as holistic point of view, and the whole district needs to work together. We have to realize that.
I just want to caution, I think, because we need to be careful about doing too many fundraisers.
Right, that's why we're saying,
And so I think that it's fine to say, okay, as one of the benefits of doing a park and rec fundraiser is, the kids get a ride on the fire truck. But I just don't think it's realistic for our firefighters to spend their time doing a fundraiser. So that's what I want to make sure that's not what's being suggested here.
I'm suggesting that.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that,
Okay, because I don't know how you all feel about that.
I think Naveed had mentioned that there have
Oh,
been
I think Tom's got
opportunities
a,
in the past where the fire department was involved in fundraising.
I mean, we're not
I'm
talking
not
about
aware
like,
of that.
I'm not talking about like an
The
event
pancake
every month,
breakfasts.
but if we have like some sort of annual event or something that they could work together. And I think working together, it could kind of help everyone, but we could, yeah.
Where the funds are split between the two?
Well, it's something that, I mean, that's something that we need to, I mean, we could have, discussions on that. I don't, we don't know the details on that, but.
I think
obviously
Tom's
it's up
got
for
a
discussion.
comment.
Yeah, hi, sorry, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I couldn't be there this evening. The first thing I wanted to address, President Fardonish mentioned something about the association purchasing a television.
No,
Uh,
The
UTV.
Oh, UTV.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay, disregard that.
No,
Yeah,
you just-
sorry.
I thought I heard new TV. Okay,
Yeah. it's a-
UTV, yes. Yeah, as far as in the past, as far as the fundraisers have gone, and I know we've done it recently, the fundraisers we do participate in, we typically, and in the past, have always given a pretty significant donation to the rec department. But in the past, we haven't had the budgetary issues that we're having now. I think it's important to take that into consideration, as Director Logan was saying. Anything we do fundraising wise takes time away from what the firefighters' duties are, and really won't amount to the capital monies that are in need at this point in time. I get every little bit counts, but I just want to, meet that caveat. And again, I'd like to make some comments before you guys close out with regards to the recommendations, but I'll wait on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's just trying to be realistic about what can and cannot be done and setting realistic expectations. So in terms of TRF, did we receive anything from TRF so far this budget period?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They already have a robust scholarship program, so we charge them at cost for every scholarship that is received or given, right? Through the rec. So every sport has received scholarship funds. The beer run that we participate in with is a 50-50 shot, so we've gotten their funding from that.
So is that the $19,000 that's on this document? That says fundraising income?
Yes.
So this document would have covered.
Well, that was actually 2020.
Yeah, this was actually, the document is actuals for last year, 24-25, which was the year that Living the Dream was held. The fiscal year that Living the Dream was last held.
So how much have we gotten so far for this budget period? Do you have that figure?
We didn't have the volunteer event this year. I don't know that number off the top of my head. But I know that it probably wouldn't have gone into the fundraising account. If it's scholarships, it's gonna go into soccer account,
Okay.
basketball account, et cetera. And I'm guessing it's somewhere around, no, round numbers without the event, probably about $6,000 to $8,000.
The beer run though, right? Was that?
The beer run would have gone into the fundraising.
Would have gone into the beer run would have gone into the,
Yeah,
yes.
it was like, I think, 7 or 8.
That was about, I think that one was 6, so.
Is that more or less than what you've gotten in years past from the beer run?
Oh, more. The beer run is on a huge upswing. It is a
Okay.
hugely popular event.
Okay, good. I don't realize things.
Any other comments on those? And then, I guess, so, the third item was eliminate the, so the third item was eliminate
Well, can we
the,
put a yay or nay on number one?
Well, do we want to hear from Director Peterson? I mean, Chief Peterson?
Yes.
well, one was the, that was the franchise fee. So I think probably, I guess,
Maybe he
yeah,
wants more.
Chief Peterson, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I know in a perfect world, we wouldn't be here in this situation. The franchise fee, I don't have any real objections if this is the direction that the board is looking at going to try and offset some of these budget deficits. So as far as number one, I don't have any comments on that. Thank you.
So then the two is the talked about,
So can we just take a consensus to see if everybody's okay with one?
I'm okay with that too.
Okay, so am I.
and then two, we talked about 10% per year to raise the revenues on the programs.
For rentals and for registration fees.
And I would say maybe for the registration fees, 10%, but I would like to see the rentals much higher.
Now, with the rentals, I know the community center, we talked about that just a couple of years ago and we raised the fees on those. So I don't know how much more we could raise the fees on that because I think that's pretty, isn't it is it $27, $29 an hour?
7, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's,
Well, you've got.
Which is less than the rec department rental is 25, so.
Well, last budget period, it was $31,000 in revenue. That was the actuals.
Yeah, that's a combined, what you're looking at there is for all types of rentals, so that's community center, like preschool at the rec center, any other classes that are held at the rec center from outside groups. And even park rentals, like reservations for picnic areas, or for example, we have teams that rent the facility to guarantee practice or game space.
should we talk about, yeah, the daycare?
Yeah, that's the only thing
Yeah.
that we also thought that perhaps like the daycare center, the rate that they're paying.
Do you know how much they're paying?
Yeah, it's 25 an hour.
Oh, it's 25 an hour. For the daycare centers, 25 an hour. They rent for 4 hours from what
4 hours, 3 days a week.
3 days a week. But pretty much, and it's like the whole building though, right? There's, I mean, not just one room, it's the whole building. And they, and because of, you know, because of the safety reasons and things like that, you can't really rent out the morning. So pretty much they rent out the whole day.
For every day a week.
$400, 3 days a week, 400, well, actually, yeah, the other two, yeah. So it'd be $100 a day for that.
So I would say at least a
the whole
15
day.
to 20% increase on the rentals.
No, you have more experience with working with them. I don't know how do you think that would,
20% of 25 is.
so be, if it's
That'd be
$30,
$5
Yeah, exactly.
an hour more.
I think that could probably be.
but then,
I mean, the just to clarify, the recommendation was like
Source of income though.
10% for 3 years, so at the end of the day, it's like really 33% more. 3 years, it goes up like 33%. What you, so that's how I interpret the recommendation, but yes, I mean, it's you can set those fees. I think the committee just felt like, look, we've got to do something soon to start building this.
Yeah.
And arrived at that, but, you know, this could be more nuanced. You can also start with this and then continue to tackle it, but if the longer you wait, you know.
Well, the problem is we're trying to, fill the deficit here while we're creating a deficit in
Right.
Park and Rec.
Exactly.
So I think we've got to be a little more aggressive than 10%. And that's what, for
For
the
rentals.
rentals.
For rental.
For the programs, I would say leave it at 10%, but I think we've got to go between 15-20% on the rentals.
Per year?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think.
well, I don't know that we should do it per year. I would say
I think this
We-
idea of saying 10% per year
compounding.
by year 3, we should identify whether we have less revenue coming in because people can afford to pay for it, because that would also be a deficit in that sense too. Or is this an acceptable amount and are people willing to pay more knowing that they're going to be able to have these facilities?
Well, I would like to see them separated, because the programs and the facility rentals I see as two separate items. And I would like to see the program stay at the recommended 10%, but I would like to see the rentals increase to anywhere between 15-20%. I don't know if it should be compounding for the next 3 years, but certainly, I mean, we've got a deficit, and we're going to now take and cap the franchise fees for Park and Rec. Well, that's going to have an impact. And so I think we've got to be a little more aggressive where we can.
How about if we do 15% for rentals and then 10% after that?
I would say 15%.
All 3 years?
Yeah, I think we've got to. I mean, we're really trying, our deficit's not gonna go away, it's just gonna grow over time.
Right, just the rentals, I mean, they're based on hours, so I did a, quick math, 10% increase. The parks would go from $30 an hour currently to, in year 3, basically $40 an hour, right? So that's not per hour, right? And that doesn't, there's a different fee if there's lights used. We don't often rent the fields with lights, right? But that's not a significant increase, right? So I don't think even a 20% increase, at least year 1, would necessarily be seen as a net negative, right? It's not gonna have a major impact. The building for the rec department building, I did not run numbers for the community center. Cause I didn't see that as being on the table, cause since we just redid that. Would the rec department building would go from $25 an hour to 33 and a quarter by year 3. So upping that, even just going to $10 an hour more, right, which is obviously different than 10%, but it's a nice round number, which I'm a big fan of for quick math, would not be, I don't think that would have a negative impact. Frankly, I think our parks rentals are probably a little low right now. Depending on the event, right? Specific to sporting rentals, like we could break it up into renting parks for sport use versus renting parks for like a birthday use, because those are significantly different impacts on the field,
Yeah.
right? And on everything. So doing something that way where it's maybe 10% for birthday use or, small gathering use, and then 20% for athletic use, I could see that working really well.
Are you talking 20% though for the next 3 years or just one?
Well, potentially, I would want to see those numbers first too, right? But potentially, it's, when I tell club teams that they gotta pay me like $30 an hour to rent a park, they're like, take my money, right? It's a lot more expensive in other areas, right? And I think that is a play, now to be fair, we don't have people banging down our doors because we fill the parks with our own programs. And we also have rest times, right? Because the facilities need rest, right? Grass specifically needs time to grow.
So you're suggesting doing 20%?
So we did 20% for athletic,
Athletic,
right? 10% for birthday gathering. That's like free money. Birthdays are free money.
okay, and then staying with 10% for the programs.
We're still saying over 3 years.
Yes.
So you do 20%, then it's 20.
Yeah, for the sports, athletic.
Just out of curiosity, do we have kind of raw numbers with what's Paso charging, what's a test?
So I don't off the top of my head. I know Paso, if you are a a city endeavor, if you're a youth sports city endeavor, part of the Paso Robles Youth Sports Council, it's something like $4 an hour. They give it away, right? But if you're an outside organization, it's, if you wanted to run a tournament, for example, at Barney Shorts, all 4 fields, it's gonna cost you a minimum of $1,500. And they only rent it for the full day,
For 1 day, 15,
one day,
for 4 feet.
4 fields, yeah. And also, those are really nice fields. There's no world we get that, right? That is not our situation, so.
So ours is gonna end up being 20%, so at 20% increase, that's gonna put us how much per hour? It'd be $30 an hour? Or,
It starts at 30, so.
Or after 3 days.
If it's compounded, it's gonna be, like 65%, 2/3 more, so about $50 an hour.
$50, so for the whole day. For the whole day, that would be for 8 hours, so $400. And so,
One
for
field,
example,
that's
That's just per field.
That's a field.
so, okay, so Everest Park would be just one of the fields.
Exactly.
400.
These are typically rented or reserved by, like, say, a club team that wants to hold practices, 2 hours twice a week kind of a thing, and they want to reserve their whole season.
So that the school may give them a better deal.
They will.
Yeah,
Is
we in
that what we wanna
agreement?
move forward with?
I mean, I agree that we should be doing at least probably the difference in birthdays and whatnot, 10%. I think we're just getting to the minutia, which ones and how much, so.
Well, and keep in mind, the recommendation was a minimum of 10%, so I guess the direction could be a minimum of 10%. Please, staff, go back, and if there are specific cases where we can justify a larger increase, let's incorporate those as well, but 10% sets the floor, not a ceiling.
I would agree with that. I really just don't want individuals to no longer be using those facilities, not having that revenue come in. And the difference between, let's just say those dollar amounts, but anything like $25 an hour versus $40 an hour could cause some individuals to look elsewhere.
So for example, our main renter at the rec center is the preschool program. And so we don't know what I mean, everybody has a break, there's a break point somewhere.
Yes.
I don't know if it's $35 an hour or if it's $100 an hour, but if we were to have lost all that, there would be a net revenue decline. Of course, the preschool also is a service in the community, right? It serves a certain population, but they also get pretty devoted space in there. Like even they're getting the value of keeping all those materials there, even when they're not renting the place.
And the full facility, right? Like run an art program in one room and a reading program in another room. Right? We can't do that during preschool because of the crossover and the way the building's laid out.
And they're charging for that.
For the preschool?
For the preschool.
Yeah.
So they've got their revenue stream as well, so.
Correct, yes. Yeah.
All these, but I wanna make sure everyone's charging for everything, like a club sport, they're charging the players to play, they're using that money to rent the fields. If it's an art class that's held there that they pay us rent, they're charging the participants to play. None of these rentals are, anything that's a class or whatever is a complimentary program. Even the programs we run, we charge participation with very few exceptions.
Understood, yeah.
If I can just interject,
Deficit.
taking into consideration our fees based on even the county park across the street, the county park fees across the street are pretty significantly, a pretty significant increase over our fees. So I don't think these fees, and I've used these parks for the last, 35 years. And county parks has always been the most expensive. Templeton Parks has been hands down the least.
Definitely go with the 10% per year over the next 3 years, but then we'll reevaluate the different facilities, including with some cost comparisons, what other.
I don't think it should be reevaluated in 3 years. I think it's gotta be.
No, I'm
reevaluated
saying,
every
no,
year.
not. I mean, that's what I'm saying is, I think we all in agreement that the minimum being 10%.
Yeah.
Each year for 3 years,
but also look,
and then start looking at the rentals, start looking at.
Well, I
those.
think we need to drill down now and figure out what those increases are. Because I'm not comfortable with just saying 10%. I don't think
No, but
it's
he's
even
saying
enough
that-
to even
he's
do
saying-
anything.
He's saying that Mel and Jeff and Justin and Natalie sit down and do a comp study and come back for this budget
Cycle.
season cycle with the new piece. Nothing to
Yeah.
wait 6
No,
months.
I'm not waiting for years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
no,
just
just
looking at
so
this
let
budget
them
cycle.
decide, let
Yeah.
them decide rather than us making the people.
Arbitrary, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we're, as you could see, we're open to go to that level.
Yeah, I think we've got to be aggressive about this.
Yeah, we could see the direction, we could give a direction and let them figure out the
Yeah.
specifics. Okay. Alright, and there's a direction.
Is there, for
Is
item
that
number two,
consensus?
is
Are you
agree?
concurrence, you didn't really talk about the programs, I think that that was an area
Programs
that.
was
Programs, I
10%.
think we're
I
all,
think programs, we said 10%. I think we were in agreement with that, the sports programs. But I think looking at the other rentals, I think we need to look at, can we make larger increases? Because we have to.
I think from this, I mean, when we're talking about the rentals, there's a finite number of potential customers, right, that we work with. It's dozens over the course of a year, not 500 like there is, or 1,000 like there is unique participants. So when I say the programs, I'm good with the fact that I think there's consensus on the 10%. That's the area that we'd have a greater concern over time about loss of participants.
Yeah.
But we don't know, I don't know what that will be, but I think 3 years in, you'll have better information. We will not, we already face other challenges, just whether, you heard just earlier of declining, student population, that's who we're really trying to serve are those same kids. So the numbers already fluctuate, but at 30%, 33% more, so if soccer goes from $200 to like $275, let's say 3 years from now, how many kids won't be participating? We just don't know.
Well, but the
There-
issue is we
10 to
can't
80
offer
for
programs that we
years.
are not sustainable. That's the issue. So we've got to figure out, and I understand there's a sweet spot here, but we have to make these programs sustainable. And right now, they're not. So we've got to figure out how to do that. And whether or not it's taking and fundraising to augment that, but we've got to, make sure we're pricing it appropriately, where it's covering its expenses. We're not a charitable organization.
yeah, I think we're all in agreement about that.
Yeah, let's do 10%. So 10%, okay, all right.
Well, but you are going to look at drilling down in the other areas where we
Yes,
can
yeah.
increase
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Where we can
With this
get,
budget.
where we can get beyond 10%.
Yeah.
There's
Okay,
also, and
thank
not
you.
to bombard you, Jeff, I was thinking about this since our meeting this morning. Refunds for sports participation were set by the board years ago in ordinance, and they're only $15. Which when sports participation was $50, that made sense, but I think we could probably increase that fairly significantly.
Can you-
So when a player signs up, pays for it, decides not to play, we charge them $15. And they get all the rest of their money back, other than any fees we incurred, like there's a $3 fee to put them into our
It's kind of
programming
Is
system.
it prorated at all?
This is for people who
Just don't even
pay, they sign up for
They
soccer
don't
in
get the
May.
uniform.
By the time the end of July comes, they're moving, or there's a hiccup or whatever, then they get it, they cancel. Once they've started, it's not eligible.
Right, yeah, or we remove significant costs, like the cost of the uniforms or whatever else has, exactly, it's a different
But you
proration.
don't prorate it if they don't finish the season.
No, typically if they,
It
typically,
has to be
So just
before the
this is
season
before.
begins.
correct, before we give them their uniform, before any games have started,
Okay.
before the significant costs have been incurred, right, for that player. And typically we have a wait list, so we just get the next kid in and they get that uniform and it's no big deal, but that could also be a way, increasing that refund rate could be a way of increasing, when we're looking at soccer and 750 kids, right, we have at least 30 refunds that we do. If we put that up from $15 to $40, right?
$15, I'm not sure it's covering our cost of.
Oh, it's not.
issuing a
It's
check.
absolutely not. It costs, the stamp is like $1 something right now. It's ridiculous, right? So even just the mailing of the check costs more, right? So, I think that could be another positive way to keep, even if there's 30 of them and we get $30 a pop, right? Even doubling that number, I think would be a really good idea. And I think we can afford that. That's not something that's gonna prevent, like, what are they gonna do? Say, okay, just keep my money, right? Like, we just keep the money.
It sounds
So-
like all of the fees should be looked at. Say
I
they
did.
need to be adjusted.
I got a list.
Promise, I mean, yeah, and again, that's, you know, yeah, you could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're okay, I think it's like we're okay with that, so, yeah, and then that, you could present that with.
Bring
I
that
guess
back with
to
all of
bring-
this.
Bring it back to probably, I guess.
Yeah, we'll have to look and see how
Yeah.
the fee was established and,
Yeah.
you know, basically the fees, the rental rates for, the facility and, the participation rates are just determined administratively. There's not a process to go through. That's why I said you could effectively make a decision today and we can adjust the rate we charge, flag football in a week.
Alright, the third item is eliminate consideration of funding the recycling grant for the fiscal year 26 and 27 and beyond. And that's the $10,000 that we do grants, and we looked at it many times. It's the same couple of organizations that are using it, and
Who's using it? Is
it's
it
the
the dog park?
dog park and the market.
The market for what?
The
Replacing styrofoam products with recyclable.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Which is
yeah,
intent.
I'm okay with
okay.
going that.
You guys okay with that? Okay, alright. The fourth item is, the efficiency, so this is what we were talking about,
Yeah, so
Do you
not
wanna-
just increasing the registration fees, but also we wanna direct staff to have an eye on increasing efficiency so that way there's a little bit more staff capacity to take on things like a fundraising effort.
so mainly is to get more parents.
Yeah, so that way we would kind of strengthen the parent and volunteer core groups for each of the sports teams, and have them take on some responsibilities and roles, either preparing the field or whatever, various duties. That way Mel and staff can focus on other things too.
Do you have a program where parents have an opportunity to get credit for work that they do? So I know when my son was in school for camp, parents could volunteer and do certain things. And if they couldn't afford the cost of camp, it was a way of getting credit by doing work in exchange for the cost of the camp. So do you have anything like that? Cause I think that's what you're alluding to is.
Well, we talked about that also, like, not necessarily, but we did talk about sort of related, would there be some sort of like a different rate or some sort of incentive to encourage that? We were a little worried about like the equity of that,
Or implementation.
yeah, the implementation, but yeah, but we were also thinking just to get some incentives.
Yeah. But you don't have anything like that?
No,
currently?
if a parent coaches, then we waive their out of district fees.
Yeah.
Right, that's it, they still pay full price.
Yeah, okay.
And same for, you know, we do have advisory committees for the soccer board, right, and the softball board. Like softball just put down 4 tons of dirt, leveled a lip, built a fence, staffed the snack bar, like they just did an enormous amount of work. Soccer, for example, we're gonna be coming to you requesting some goals for German Park, which haven't been replaced since I was in high school in the 90s. It was the 1900s, and so we'll need to be replacing those goals. They're about $3,500 a piece, shipped and taxed and all of that. Soccer board will likely be throwing about $5,000. They might just buy them all, right? And that's all just through the fundraisers that they do through hosting the snack bar, different tournaments where the All-Star program raises them money. And then they send that right back to us.
Yes, I think-
So there are other ways that, you know, we
Some-
save significant costs.
Some sports programs have already robust parent
Parents.
involvement. I think we just wanna see that spread across
Yeah.
the array of programs.
Well, some of that come through organized sports national programs, AYOS, soccer is a one, Little League, which I don't know, you know, you do a lot of softball. But Little League is another one where it's all parents.
Yeah, so we do partner with them. And they have, you know, requirements for parent volunteerism. I mean, there's a lot of parent volunteerism in our programs, so.
This one is pause all efforts and expenditures associated with the current plans to expand the fire station until such time as the fire fund is forecasted to support the expected increase in asset replacement contribution, which is estimated annually at 62,500. So obviously it and then we suggest that, I know there were some immediate needs such as a new bathroom and the this clean room and things like that, and we talked about with maybe putting a mobile trailer mobile where it comes with its own bathrooms as well as locker rooms, have that in the back, and then obviously do the bathroom as needed, the one that's needed downstairs, make that bigger and functional for everyone. So the whole, the whole thing with the fire department, as Deborah, you were on the committee at the time, when original plans came through, it was $5 million.
Well, when it was 2.5 million, and then when it.
Yeah.
Like 9 months later, it
Balloons.
Yeah.
ballooned to
So
5
it's,
million.
and we do have the funds, enough money in the asset replacement to go ahead and do a lot of that renovations, but the problem is the asset replacement where you have to put back, cover it over 40 years, and that's $62,000 per year. So that's where the problem is, and the recommendation, the reason we did this recommendation is because of the changes that we've made with our staff at this point. So we're now down to 2 people per shift. So that obviously has increased our cost. And this is a board discussion. In a second, I want to hear from the chief as well. In terms of the urgency, what can we, see exactly what we need and put a budget on it. We decided, we thought that at $250,000, we should be able to get the trailer, because Justin, you've looked at it for your staff, and then hopefully renovate the bathroom. I guess I'll go ahead. So that was the thinking behind this. So we'll just go ahead and have the chief speak at this point. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Chief.
My recommendation would be to alter this recommendation from the perspective of putting it on pause. I would recommend we continue with the application process, get it to permit point, and then still go out to bid on this, because I think the intent was to see what the numbers will be. We've wasted a bunch of money if we don't bring this to at least that point. At that point, obviously, if it comes back at 2.5 million and we don't have the 65 in asset replacement, we don't move forward. But it would be my recommendation, we move the permitting process all the way through, get it permitted, and then get to the point where we know what the numbers by going out to bid. That's not going to really cost us any more than what we budgeted for. Secondly, that in my opinion, a trailer out back would be a waste of capital money. We can do modifications in the proposed 250,000 range with the interior right now with 2.0 staffing. That would give us, to a degree, somewhat what we need on the primary or high priority items. One of the significant things that we are going to have to do in anticipation of the expansion was the old exhaust system didn't work. We're going to have to look at the replacement of that exhaust system. we could potentially, this is a cancer prevention thing, and you know, I'm sorry, but after my just recent surgery last week and cancer and all of that, I'm very high on cancer prevention stuff. We need to eliminate that exhaust out of the apparatus bay. So that's going to be a primary item. The secondary items would be readjusting some of the rooms upstairs to accommodate for sleeping quarters, and then reorganizing or reconsidering some of the downstairs space. But I would highly recommend, yes, we expand the downstairs bathroom to have a shower at a minimum, and make it a little bit larger into the what's currently the engineer's space, and then reconfigure those offices. That can be done well within a $250,000 budget, depending upon what the numbers come back on the exhaust evacuation system.
All right, thank you. Okay, bring it back.
Can I recommend that this be taken up with the fire committee? Because I think that's where a lot of the discussions have taken place. And I think that's where you can kind of prioritize what needs to be done and what those costs are, and to monitor it closely. Because I don't think this is something we can evaluate in 3 years. I think this has got to be monitored very closely, but there is, I think, a sense of urgency in getting what needs to be done to modify the fire station.
Yes, and I think the biggest thing to take into consideration is if we take it back to the fire committee, that will allow us, I really don't want to delay on it too long, but that will allow us to sit down and come up with the high priority budget items that, or station items that need to be addressed.
And the costs. So I think that's.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
And the cost associated with.
Cost, yes.
So I think it would be appropriate for the fire committee to continue to look at this.
Yes, we could do that, but however, it was to put a pause, and so we given a budget, so we'll.
I think the
You know,
budget could be,
Yeah,
that
because I'm
one
not
is
comfortable with saying, let's
Yeah.
pause it.
Okay.
Because I think it comes down to, we have committed to 24/7 firefighters, and the community has committed to that. And I think what we've got to do is, we've got to make working conditions that are conducive to having 24/7. And there's a priority in which we've got to do that. Pardon me?
What areas are your concern right now?
Well, I think that, you know, not having the protective gear being inside the bay with the diesel, you know, that's an issue, the exhaust.
Well, that we could address that.
Well,
with
but
the-
that's why I'm saying is that I would like to see the fire committee come up with, and working with the fire chief to say, what's the priority? And what's the cost associated with that? Because this has got to be monitored very
That's-
quickly
That's,
and closely. And I don't think,
but that's different from doing the remodel of $2.5 million.
but we've got to do something, we can't
Well,
pause it.
No,
And that's what's.
no, that's two separate things. Doing the remodel, that's gonna be at least conservatively $2.5 million versus doing what's.
Over
the-
time, that's $2.5 million over time.
Not really.
Then let's just, let's say we take the chief's recommendation, if we were to go through the permitting process, what is our costing for that going to be?
Well, it's gonna be permitting as well as going out to bid, yeah.
I think the thought process behind this was that we didn't want to have a stale bid, because like the 2.5 that suddenly became 5 million, the thought is that if we continue too far with pursuing the renovation and rehab as we had originally thought about it, pursuing those original plans, to going out to bid and pursuing the permitting process too far along, the numbers are going to change anyway. And so if we're not going to be touching a majority of the rehab for a long period of time, why did we go out to bid to get these numbers that are not going to be accurate by the time we're ready anyway? And so I think what we were trying to say is pause pursuing that current and instead pivoting to come up with those high priority things that we could do in the short term at a lower price point, but that would make the biggest impact in terms of addressing some of the serious health issues that are present currently at the station. And so I don't think it's necessarily, I think maybe the verbiage here, we're not pausing the renovation entirely. We're sort of suggesting that we pivot and instead come up with a short list that we can tackle a little bit faster and more with a smaller budget.
So I'm still gonna say.
I'd like the board, just really quick, I'd like the board to keep in mind that we've spent over $100,000. I want to say 150,000 on this process already. And we still don't know what a fire station is going to cost us. We've had a cost estimate, but those cost estimates have literally been wildly different. This would give us the real cost estimate. So we don't know what that is yet. And that would be my recommendation to move forward to get the real cost estimate. That way we have the real numbers and we can gauge on percentage of increase per year on construction at that point. Even if we get it this year and it can't be built for another 5, at least we have a base number to draw from.
Well, we know no matter what, it's gonna be more than 250. And so
So-
if we're saying like just a rough estimate, we know that like the asset replacement that would have to happen is gonna be so great right now with our deficit. It doesn't really matter how much the number is if we don't have the money for it.
I understand what you're saying, but again, then we've just taken this $150,000 that we've spent.
Yeah.
And we've just thrown it out the window.
Yeah.
Where we've already paid for so much and we are so close that we're not going to be really spending any more to take this to completion of permit and put it out to bid. It really doesn't cost much more, if anything.
I thought that we had talked about that the admin costs for procurement can be pretty high.
So I don't know if we would have to incur additional costs with the architect to prepare the bid documents and those kinds of items. And actually formally issue a request for bids and whatnot.
Those were within its contract.
So you've also got a time limit. And if you don't get to the time, then you have to redo the whole process.
You
So
can resubmit. You can
you
resubmit.
can,
Well, and I don't-
if they
I don't
don't, they don't do it forever.
No.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily mean a permit. I mean an approved set of plans.
Yeah,
So
it's true. You know, I think it's true that depending on the length of time between the time we get a permittable project and when we ultimately build, the longer that span is, the more revisions might be necessary to the plans to meet new code requirements, et cetera.
Every 3 years.
But we don't know how long that wait would be. Those would be
I
costs that would be incurred later when.
I really think it should go back to the committee on this particular item.
Fire committee.
Because I really don't know enough right now to.
Well, I mean, what would the purpose be? So I mean, we have what are we gonna discuss? I mean, we need to have some, as a committee, we need to have some sort of direction from board, so that way we could address it. I mean, just taking it back to the committee to discuss, what are we discussing? Are we,
I think some of the items to discuss is the prioritization and the costing estimates of some of these things. So let's say the exhaust, like, do we actually know how much money that's gonna cost us? How much is gonna go for the bathrooms? How much is gonna go for the turnout? Is 250 adequate even for all of that? So to get some better numbers would.
so, but again,
Drill
so again, we're just being very specific. So we're not gonna be discussing the whole plan then. We're not discussing everything. We're just gonna be very specific in terms of what items do we wanna see and be somewhere around the ballpark of $250,000. So I'm okay with that, but if we're gonna come back and just continue the process of continuing, you know, looking at the plans, permitting, going to.
But even
to
if we
bid.
don't, let's not go out to bid, let's say, you know, we just get the final plans that we could do Mills, yes, we'll have to do revisions to them. Is it gonna be, are we saving any money with that?
If,
Like, if it's only gonna cost us however much dollars to finish up for.
I think the plans are done, the plans are ready to resubmit, so whatever, whatever we've spent to get them as far as has been spent, there's the cost going forward would be to address either future plan corrections, there's another round of those, we don't know yet. The special inspector, getting them under contract, if there's a requirement to get that concluded. Otherwise, you know, we've sunk the cost into development plan.
Yes.
So my recommendation is also to send it back to the fire department.
Well, we can discuss this forever. I think we should take a vote. We're gonna send it back or we're not gonna send it back. And let's go
but
on to that.
I don't mind sending it back, but what are we I mean, I just wanna be clear on what we're gonna, I mean, gonna agendize
discuss
it.
I think
What-
there's
what-
gotta be a detailed discussion about what the priority is, where you're at in the current process, what the priority is, and then what the costs are. And
Okay.
then that will determine whether or not there there is the funding for it, whatever needs to be done in that priority list. But I think it's a detailed discussion that needs to happen with the fire committee. I don't think we're ready for the board to say, oh, it's $250,000. Well, what are we spending $250,000 on?
But this was based on the priorities that were mentioned before. The clean out station and as well as the bathroom. Those were the top priorities.
Can I add something? I think if we split this into two different items, the pausing of the current permitting and then a separation, and look at what it would take to enhance the fire station to make it, for lack of a better term, acceptable for the near future, and just separate those two. I don't think the permitting aspect, in my opinion, is going to cost us hardly anything more. We're there. The resubmittal doesn't cost anything unless we go to the third plan review, then there might be. If we start getting to that, then we pause it. But at this point, pausing it, we've just thrown the money out. And it's not costing us any more to move forward to the point of getting an approved set of plans. Now, with regards to what I would recommend a separate item, looking at the station and saying, okay, this is what we need and these are the priorities and these are the costs. Yeah, we can do that at fire committee.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with the fire committee examining this item. I think that my understanding of, I think I was also thinking, as the chief mentioned, that these are two separate items. My understanding is that the process about pursuing the plans, that we were sort of at a convenient pause point where a nice clean break, but if that's not the case, I think that that's something that could be discussed by the fire committee about whether or not, like, what would that clean intermission, when does that happen? If there's, like, you know, one more submittal that happens without a lot of tax on staff and admin time, then fine. Or if it makes sense that we've finished out a phase and we can pause.
All right, fine, we'll go ahead, if we move forward, we could do that. But are we in agreement that we can't do the $2.5 million remodel?
At this time, yes.
Yes,
All right.
at this
so-
time, unless a miracle happens.
Okay, so we're in that agreement,
Yes.
so that's at least we could focus our, pay, okay, so I'm okay with moving forward. Finishing up the plans, getting into, so how about going out to bid, or you guys wanna go out to bid? I mean, I guess that would be something that fire committee.
I think the
could
fire
discuss.
committee needs to,
Costing and evaluating it,
Okay.
you know, if going out to bid, it's not gonna cost anything.
Okay.
So we can get some numbers.
All right, so
We know they're
basic-
not hard numbers, but we at least have stuff for our future projections, great. If it's staffing hours,
Okay.
expenditure, hiring contractor, all those types of things, that's gonna push that lower on.
Okay, so direction is to move forward as far as we can without costing too much.
Any
Yeah,
significant-
okay, all right, we'll do that. We're in agreement that we definitely not gonna be able to do that $2.5 million remodel. And then try to target somewhere around that 250, 300, whatever,
Yes.
somewhere around there. Okay, all right.
Can I just throw out there if the guys have any comments to what I have recommended? We all good?
Go to public, any comment from public?
The guys.
Guys?
You're at the podium.
Let me go to the phone. Baker's got a whole list of stuff.
No, your
I'm just kidding,
concert would be greatly.
I would love to say something.
Yeah.
Will you guys entertain me for 4
Yeah,
minutes?
yeah.
Oh, you got 3 minutes.
I'll talk fast. Good evening, members of the board. Throughout the last 18 months, I've been assisting Chief Peterson, like many other members of the TCSD, in planning a station expansion. I'd like to respectfully speak regarding the recommendation to pause the fire station expansion. The current conditions in our station are not simply outdated. They directly impact firefighter safety, health, and our ability to effectively serve the community. Right now, as you guys discussed, our turnout gear is stored in the apparatus bay, continuously exposed to diesel exhaust and contaminants. We do not have a diesel exhaust extraction system, which means firefighters are regularly exposed to known Class 1 carcinogens inside the apparatus bay and the living quarters. Templeton Fire is the only fire department in SLO County where personnel sleep and live in attached living facilities without a diesel exhaust system. Our makeshift gym is located in apparatus bay, meaning firefighters are working out in the same environment where emergency vehicles start, idle, and return from incidents. With the arrival of our new Type 1 engine this fall, this limited space currently used for fitness equipment will effectively disappear, leaving us without a gym dedicated to physical fitness. Regular exercise is a critical part of the injury prevention and fire service. Studies show that firefighters who exercise regularly are approximately 50% less likely to suffer non-exercise related injuries, largely including the long-term injuries sustained on the fire ground or while lifting patients. Providing a safe, dedicated space for fitness is the most practical investment in reducing job injuries and subsequent sick leave and overtime. Inside the living quarters, we have only one shower for the crew, some of which consists of some of the crews which consist of a male and female to use after fires and hazardous calls. Proper decontamination after incidents is critical for reducing long-term cancer risks in the fire service. Our station alerting system is outdated and relies on loud tones throughout the building, which causes the interruptions and proven cardiac stress. We back up this unreliable system with additional pagers that we keep in each one of our bedrooms, which also emits those loud tones. Modern stations use the improved alerting systems with soft tones designed to protect firefighter health and reduce those risks. In addition, basic living conditions are lacking. Each one of us spend 1/3 of our lives here, and we don't have a proper dining space. Crews currently, we share our meals on TV trays. Many parts of the station, including carpets that are over 20 years old, have exceeded their useful life. Our mini split, the HVAC system that we had installed once the current one went bad, has been installed according to the planned future locations and will require moving if we hold off on expansion plans. This project is not about luxury or expansion for the sake of expansion. It's about correcting serious safety deficiencies and providing the basic facility firefighters need to stay healthy and ready to respond to emergencies. Delaying the project does not eliminate these problems. It only prolongs them and offsets the progress we have already made, likely increasing costs in the future. I respectfully ask you guys to consider continuing forward with the fire station expansion, or at least a permitting phase to see where we get. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments?
I agree with everything you said.
Same. Thank you.
Needs to improve. Period.
I agree. I just wish we had the money. Stuff.
Yeah, I think that we are all in agreement that we
I mean,
want to,
I
that
wa-
there are some things that like, without a doubt need to happen
Yeah.
immediately.
Alright, so are we okay to move on from this one?
Yeah, I mean, I just noted that the fire committee will tackle this recommendation in kind of two parts. Determining what components of the station plans can be wrapped up, without significant expenses. So we can take advantage of the investment we've already made, at least conclude those plans, and then separately tackle determining the highest priority for renovations to the existing space to improve safety and other high priority needs, and determine a budget for that. Separately, and I'll also make this clear with the fire committee, it's gonna be shifting how this is paid for. So we're using words kind of interchangeably, like expansion and renovation, and I'll be the first to admit that the expansion included some interior renovation spaces, but it was truly an expansion of facilities. When we're talking about simply replacing items like replacing an HVAC unit or replacing diesel exhaust systems, that's not associated with an expansion of the station. You're not gonna be able to use the capital funds for that. We'll have to use like asset replacement funding. It'll have the same impact as to the operating fund in terms of paying that back into the asset replacement account, but it does change the funding makeup if it's not gonna be associated with a legitimate expansion.
And that one we have like 900,000.
Something like that, yes.
Thank you. All right. And then item 6. Oh, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to mention, with regards to what the general manager just mentioned, there will be some items based on how we prioritize this, that will be new items that we currently don't have. So we would have to break those down and let you know what potentially could be capital and what would be asset replacement.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And then item 6 is, it is recognized that both fire fund and parks recreation and solid waste fund will likely be in deficit in the near future. So the district should consider whether or not additional fundraising for both funds can be a sustainable source of revenue. If it's determined that it can be, one or more new annual fundraising events should be planned and held to raise money for both parks and recreation and fire. Any comments on that? I know we talked about it a little bit before.
I think it becomes a balance in terms of how many fundraisers you do, because it's gonna be hitting from the same source. And I just don't see it as sustainable. Yeah, I think there's some tough decisions that have to be made. And I go back to, we look at when the district was formed. We tried before doing Measure A, we tried going to the county and asking for additional funds from the county, and that fell on deaf ears. But, when the district was formed, it was formed with the understanding that there was just property tax coming for the fire. And that got expanded to Park and Rec. So, I think, as much as and it's not to say that I don't support Park and Rec, but when I look at fire, Park and Rec, fire is more important. And I think it comes down to, are we going to be committed to having a fire department that's not just staffed 24/7, but also is an environment that's safe for employees to work in?
How does that relate to this item though?
Well, I just don't think you can say fire and Park and Rec, this is what you're gonna be able to address your deficit going forward. I think there's just gonna have to be some difficult decisions in terms of allocation of property tax.
Oh, so yeah, so you're suggesting to cut back the parks allocation of property tax further. But if you do the worst thing possible and eliminate all the rec programs, all the staffing, everything if it's eliminated, we still need to take care of our facilities. So we still, that's why that the report that we have.
And the facilities are sorely lacking.
Well,
I've walked those
yeah,
fields.
But we still need to take care of them, we still need to take care of our parks, so if we eliminate all the rec programs, everything, we're only gonna gain $90,000. That's all we're gonna gain. So right now, what we're looking with fire department, the deficits, if we don't do anything, is much greater than $90,000. So if we continue on this spending path, and I do, and I understand, and I totally understand, we need to.
When it's
excuse
spinning
me.
path,
Yes, it is. We are, I mean, if we continue what we're doing, we
with
change
Park and
the,
Rec or with.
for the fire department. We're doing a lot, and I understand we need it, but if we continue to do this, our deficit's gonna be far, far greater than $90,000 a year that would, that would be.
I understand, and
given
that
from the parks.
becomes a bigger issue in terms of, do we even have money for a fire department?
Yes.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
because we only have $400,000, so let's say if we did this expansion at 62,500. And then we adding, currently, we estimated because of our, some updates, we probably at $60,000-$70,000 deficit spending already. We add another 60,000, that's gonna be $130,000 a year. There's no way we could recover that in any way, there isn't money. And I've looked at this, I've looked at it 2 years ago, now there is no more money.
It's been a problem
So
for the
we
past
could-
10 years.
We could make a Taj Mahal here, but.
I don't think they're
but-
asking for a Taj
but-
Mahal.
but-
They're not
but
asking,
if
but
we-
wait a
but- I
minute,
mean,
you know
no,
what,
wait,
I'm gonna
but
take
I'm- we
exception
could-
with that, David.
No,
It's-
no, I mean, Ethan, I'm just saying, we could, I mean, that's what I want, but we
But
just
that's
don't
not
have
what
the
they're
money. We
asking
just have-
for. That's not what they ask you.
Well, okay, maybe I.
That's a bad
apologize.
choice of words.
Okay,
I just wanna
okay,
call you out
okay.
on it.
Thank you for calling me on that, I apologize to
Yeah.
everyone. We could build what they want, but then we would have to turn around and say we can't afford it.
But it's what they
So-
need. It's not what they
Okay,
want.
what
It's
they
what's,
need,
it's
okay,
just, it's, I
what they
think what's
need,
being
okay.
asked for is
Again, I
to make it a
apologize what they need, but we
24/7
can't afford it.
fire station.
We can't
I
afford
agree.
it. We just simply cannot afford it. I don't want any of these guys to have to worry about their jobs 4 or 5 years from now. I wanna give them a just secure job, know that they could come to.
But I think it goes
Temple.
beyond just a job. It's also, unfortunately, Measure A only addressed 24-hour staffing, and as we well know, it did not address, do we have a facility to house 24/7 staffing? Because that fire station was never intended for 24/7 fire staffing. So we're now at a disadvantage now having to deal with that. And I get that there's no funds, but I think that comes down to, it's not just staffing, it's making sure we've got staffing that is in a safe environment.
But this is what we have. This is what we have to work with.
Well, then I think we need to rethink what do we need? In terms of, do we go back and ask for additional funds from the community? Or to address the fire station, or do we look at other alternatives? Because I don't think we can, I don't think it's fair to these men and women who work in that environment where we've got known carcinogens.
But we just discussed this, and we just discussed that we are gonna pursue. And the fire committee is gonna take up the task of working with the chief to come up with the list of the high priority improvements that we can make.
But I'm hearing something else, that I'm hearing that we don't have enough.
We don't
ever
have
to-
2.5 right now.
And so will we ever? So I think that's becomes the issue.
But no, you were mentioning that we need to make some tough choices.
If
And,
we
and
cannot
I-
provide a fire station and
and what-
environment,
Well, you mentioned that we need to allocate the property taxes more to fire department. I'm just saying, the maximum we could do is another $90,000. And that's not gonna get us anywhere.
Close to 2.5.
I mean, so I'm just trying to, for us to be realistic, it's just, there's not enough money. And that's what I'm trying to say.
And
Yes,
even
I-
shuffling around the existing funds with what we have doesn't make up the whole. And so I'm a little uncomfortable with the discussion, like veering too far into taking away all of the funds from recreation and the property taxes and shifting them all to fire, because that's a little bit more of like
I've
a,
not suggested that.
okay,
I've given you a history,
right,
but I've not suggested
Okay.
that. What I'm saying is that we have a finite property tax.
yeah,
That's being split between two services.
right.
There's some tough decisions, and my point is that I don't think it's appropriate, I don't think it's right for this board to have workers in an environment that is not safe. We've got to address the fire station.
Yes.
That's gotta be done, or we've gotta look at saying, do we go get more money from the residents to cover that expense? Or do we turn Templeton Fire, no offense, over to CAL FIRE?
I think we're all in agreement about that. And the only thing that is different is in this document that the ad hoc committee prepared is instead of saying reevaluate going out to residents for more funding, we just use the word fundraising.
But
And
my
so if you're
point is at
uncomfortable-
some point there's gotta be a decision made. What are we doing? Cause this is just not gonna solve the problem.
No, and I don't think this will solve the problem. I believe you're correct, but us going down this route to make certain implementations of certain ideas, of how we do our funding, and how we start paying for things, including maintenance on buildings, will give us an idea of what some of those difficult choices are going to look like in the future, rather than not doing these things. These things now is going to help us get a better idea of what things we need to do. It includes a lot of discussions that would be very difficult to have if we find that we can't afford it. And if we can't, what do we do next? But this helps us here and now.
I don't know. Personally, I feel like we've been kicking the can down the road. Far too long. Wayne?
I don't disagree with anything I've heard, but I don't understand you saying we kicked the can down. How are we kicking the can down the road right now?
Right, yeah,
I mean,
that-
we're trying to do
We're
something.
trying to do
right now.
something, but this is
What
nothing
would you
new than
do? What would you do to solve this problem? And I don't think there's an answer to that, so. I mean, you like to talk about history. I like to look at Los Alamos 10 years ago or whatever. They gave up the rec department to save the fire department. But 10 years later, they had to give up the fire department. Now they don't have a rec department. Now they don't have a fire department. So, I mean, I don't think anybody in this room has an answer, but I think we need to move forward with some of this stuff.
Oh, I don't
So we have
disagree.
have a
We need to
better-
move forward.
have a
I
better
just think that,
chance.
You know, that fundraising is not gonna be the answer, is my point.
I don't think it's the only answer.
But I mean, all we're talking about here is fundraising, and I have to 100% agree. I don't think you should combine the fire and the rec anyway, because you've got all these families out there. I don't think if you did one fundraiser, you're gonna make anywhere near the money that you'd make if you just had the one for the rec department. I mean, you've got a number of people that will support fire, they don't want to support rec, they're old like me and say, well, my kids, I don't need it anymore, so. You know, but I'm gonna need the fire department to come take me when I have my heart attack. And then you got the young families that want the rec department, they don't think they're ever gonna have their house burned down or, so they're two separate entities. And I just don't think fundraising together is gonna work. So, I mean, that's all we should be talking about here anyway, is the
So
fundraising.
eliminate number 6,
I think we should move forward with,
so eliminate number 6.
living the dream or whatever, like Mel does every day. And,
I think this is just for
Especially today.
expectations. This is not a long-term, and I don't think it's sustainable.
well, I don't think anybody disagrees with that.
He asked me and I answered his question.
I'm just saying, I don't think anybody disagrees with that.
Yeah, I think we're all. The budget is not a great place. And we're all just trying to figure out how to make it work for next year and how to make it work for the next 5
You
years.
don't really even need to identify parks and rec and fire within the idea of any reasonable fundraising that can be applied. You know, if we do a wine run next year, we pull in money for whomever. fundraising is just one of the multiple methods that organizations utilize. They're not going to be wasting their time evaluating whether or not that's even something.
And I think that like the idea was that I'll speak for myself. I hate that this tension exists when we think about the budget, that it's, well, can we just take it from the parks and we can just give it to the fire? And I hate that this tension exists because it's a false solution that doesn't actually solve the problem. And so what I was thinking when we came up with number 6 is that I think of the district as a whole in the budgetary deficit. And so I would like to think about it as a holistic way of thinking about how can we support these 2 departments that are so important to our community and not cut services. And instead of it being like, well, let's just move from this pot over to here, let's support them both. How do we do that? And so that was my thinking and my motivation behind helping to craft this idea. If that is something you don't think is like that we shouldn't be calling out the specific departments and we should just keep it as like fundraising in general or exploring other revenue sources. You know, I'm open to any suggestions, but I think we're just trying to think creatively about how do we address what we know is going to be a growing issue moving forward. I'm not trying to put an extra burden on our fire staff. I'm not trying to put an extra burden on Parks and Rec, but I am just trying to think of like our district in general has a budgetary limitations and we have a lot of things that we want to pursue. We have a lot of renovations that we need to make and investments. How can we do that? How can we generate more income?
Been the problem for the past 10 years that I've served on this board.
Yeah.
This isn't anything new.
Okay.
I mean, I appreciate what you've done, so don't get me wrong. I'm frustrated, and that's where I'm frustrated, because to your point, it's a single bucket of money
Right.
that is not sufficient. And what my concern is that we're putting firefighters at risk. And have you toured the facilities? Yeah, I mean, they're shameful.
I think the point that Naveed was trying to make that you took issue with his phrasing was the last thing that we want to do is we think about what you had mentioned is if we make this investment and we are able to give our fire staff the station that they need and deserve, but then a few years later, we find ourselves in a financial position where we're no longer able to operate our own fire staff. Well, are we just handing the keys over to CAL FIRE towards this brand new station that, you know, and so that's a position nobody wants to be in. And so I think we're trying to, you know,
but I don't think
improvements.
but I don't think it's realistic to think that we can continue to have employees work in a known environment
Yes.
with carcinogens.
Yes, I
in
agree.
good conscience.
I agree. And that's why the fire committee is gonna look at, you know.
All right, so are we changing the wording for number 6 or keeping it?
I think we just remove the departments from it.
Yeah, just keep
Look
it.
at it as an alternative potential.
We just keep it as the district,
Okay.
the district. That's it.
Yeah. And number 7 is no later than 2029, a new ad hoc committee should be formed to review the results of any implemented recommendations contained here and determine if for further action is needed.
29 or looking at 20?
Well, we want to do it before the budget for, so because this
I
3
think
years.
the intent was like 3 years after this, you know,
Yes.
before the budget, before the fiscal year 29-30 budget developed,
Okay,
So it would be like about this time and
early 29,
early
maybe,
29.
maybe say not later than early 2029.
Yeah,
Wouldn't it be a good idea to look at it annually? See what's happening, see if it's doing anything?
well, the ad hoc committee is,
To examine
But
the
then
whole
you're
document.
saying that the ad hoc committee is gonna continue on and meet the next time in 3 years. I think
No, it's not gonna.
it'd have to be
Yeah,
a
it'd
new
be a
ad
new
hoc
ad hoc.
committee.
I think it should be done annually, looked at annually.
But I think we are with some of these measures, when we're looking at, let's say, a 10% per year, we're asking for Parks and Rec.
Yes, the committee,
So
yeah,
these smaller committees, of the Parks and Rec and the Fire Committee and everything else like that, will be receiving updates
yes,
on what our revenue projections are that we'll be able to bring before the board here. And ad hoc, grabbing all of those individuals up. Yeah, it's just more meetings.
yeah, so, yeah, ad hoc needs to be short.
I think,
meet
yeah,
the
we'll
purpose, that's
synthesize
it,
all
yeah.
that information that's gonna.
Yeah,
come
we
in
give
annual.
direction.
We are going
and
to be
then-
looking at this every year.
Yes, we are. And then this is to, basically, this ad hoc committee, you just say, okay, we need to, we need to improve this part or change this or that and come up with new solutions. Just like we did 2 years ago. We had an ad hoc committee, met, and then that was it. And then now again, we did it again. All right.
I wanna make sure if you don't mind, maybe I can go through the whole thing and just make sure my notes match what you think we discussed tonight, so we know how to move forward. So of the 7 recommendations, there was consensus to move forward with item number 1, that's the freezing of the solid waste franchise fees to Parks and Recreation solid waste, with the remainder going to the fire fund as revenue beginning next fiscal year. Item number 2 was to increase all recreation program and facility rental costs by a minimum of 10%, with specific instructions to staff to identify those options that could increase higher than 10% immediately. And that would to take effect as soon as the next, not necessarily as part of the budget, but as soon as the next registration opens up. So for example, flag football registration opens up in a couple of weeks, and the minimum of 10% adjustment would take effect immediately. There will be other facility rentals or and other options that could see a higher than 10% increase. We'll also, as a review, how any fees that are set by the board were determined and examine options to increase those as separate actions and bring those forward if necessary. Item 3 was to eliminate the consideration of funding of the recycling grant. That's just direction to staff. That'll be part of the 26-27 budget planning. The result of those 3 is anticipated to be the elimination of 1 full-time position in parks maintenance. And we'll plan on replacing some of that help with a part-time position and determine how much money is available as we develop the budget for 26-27. Item number 4 is really direction from this board to the Parks, Recreation and Refuse Committee concerning volunteerism and opportunities for gains in efficiency to free up staff time, to broaden recreation programs and facilitate fundraising efforts. I don't have a note that there was consensus on that, but I wanted to just confirm that this really is a request of the ad hoc committee to the board to direct the Parks and Recreation and Refuse Committee to lead that effort. It's not a yes or no immediately kind of thing. It's going to be something that's under study. Item 5 is the station expansion. That's really 2 items, both going back before the Fire and Emergency Management Committee. One related to finding a place that we could pause the station expansion plans, but fully utilize the value of the plans themselves and determine if we can get it to a permittable state. And then the second item being develop the highest priority list of items and costs for making the fire station livable in its current state. Item number 6 then, I guess, I don't know that that there was really acceptance of this. There was a reference to removing, 6 was the fundraising efforts, to removing references to who we would raise money for, Parks and Recreation and Fire. This request was really that the district should consider this. And I guess you could ask, I think you discussed it, but there really was no consideration of this tonight. Yes, let's form a new fundraiser or whatever. So I think I would need some better direction. Do you expect this to come back to you as a board for further deliberation? Or are you asking the committees to review it? By removing some of the specificity about which departments, it makes it a little bit hard for us to, we know that the challenges in Parks and Recreation and Fire. I guess I would say, if I was to try to create what I thought the concurrence was, is, hey, if Parks and Recreation can keep the Living the Dream a going concern and be a substantial revenue source, then we should support that effort. But the majority of the board didn't feel like the fire department was gonna be able to successfully fundraise in a sustainable way going forward without kind of new efforts. That was sort of my read on what was discussed.
I mean, to me, we could just, you know,
You just eliminate six.
Just don't need it. Go back to where we were. So, I know what you're thinking, I agree, but we don't.
Is there opportunities for more fundraising from, say, Parks? Are there other opportunities out there, or are we maxing that out?
Well, right now, I think we're maxed out.
So the issue, I mean, I'll let, so we did, you know, so I would say, you know, I couldn't speak firsthand about what was done 20 and 30 years ago. We recognized in Parks and Recreation, we had a deficit about a decade ago, and the staff developed a maybe too successful of a fundraiser in terms of money making, and it really was a big hit. COVID hit. We didn't have the program for 2 years. We did it again in 2022. It made a lot of money, but it's a big effort. So we talk about like pivoting roles from what you are previously assigned to working on the fundraiser. That's a big. It's like running a whole nother program or series of programs to put it on. It was successful. The thought was, hey, maybe TRF could do that, and we could partner with them, and they could take some of the heavy lifting. That was just, I mean, maybe not super successful, that they had to delay, and it didn't make the amount of money because they incurred a lot of costs that we didn't previously in terms of facility rentals and paying for coordinators. And so that model isn't probably worth it. I mean, in my mind, like if you've got to spend $50,000 and a bunch of time to make $70,000, did you really make any money? So that model really probably doesn't work for us in terms of the district staff. But we've done other smaller fundraisers that have been, you know, that have raised some money, but not $70,000. But everything takes some time. But we've organized some drive-through barbecue and drive-through dinners and other smaller activities. I think you could, if this is something that you want to study further, is you could assign this to the Parks and Recreation Committee and get some feedback from those who have been more directly involved in the fundraising and see what's worthwhile. Because again, if I look at it, I go, well, we're paying for staff members to do fundraising. I've got to take that right off the top. I mean, if you're spending $25,000 to raise $25,000, I'm not sure that's been a good use of the money. You know, if you spend $25,000, you raise $250,000. That was great. But there's no guarantees on these kinds of items, and we don't necessarily have a really reliable, robust nonprofit arm like TRF was envisioned to be 15 years ago. Right
Or even what it was a few years ago.
Well, I mean, at this point, I appreciate Mel, if we're gonna do the volunteer dinner that comes back. That was one thing I just thought about it, though. They're probably gonna close down the Legion Hall.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I gotta find that.
we'll probably do it at the hotel again.
Yeah, okay.
Cause
Alright.
it's
So,
relatively low cost, and we can use TRF and their nonprofit ID
yeah, okay. All right.
and use them as volunteers and then keep all their money.
What would it be acceptable to kind of pivot number 6 and say, staff will keep the committee, the Parks, Recreation, Solid Waste Committee, Refuse Committee, kind of up to date on fundraising status and that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's-
thank you.
Okay, and then, number 7, I think there was, I'll clarify that that's not in the early 2029, and, the district would form a new ad hoc committee.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's good. Before we move on, any other ideas anybody wants to either ad hoc committee look at or any of the committees to look at that they think would be worth where we could save money or revenues, cut back, whatever
Increase.
Yes. Maybe, okay. I'm gonna go to public, just public, any ideas you guys have listened? You guys know, like, you know. Any ideas, I'm sure you guys know this is not easy, so we appreciate any input, so. If you guys come up with something down the road, let us know. So, okay.
I will say we're constantly applying for grants everywhere that we can find them and
That's not,
trying to get income that way, but.
appreciate that. Thank you you guys, thank you for all you do.
Then before you leave, because before you move on to the next item, sorry, please don't leave either. But, before you move on to your next item, item number 2 on this list does, in order for it to be implemented right away, I think it could require a vote. So if your direction, if your request as the board is to implement this immediately, I would request a formal motion and a second for implementing item number 2, and then the remainder being as direction to staff to incorporate in the future budget. And there were a couple of cases where they were going back to the committee for committees, not the ad hoc committee, but specific committees for more work. That would be helpful. That helps provide an answer when someone says, well, why is this rate going up? We say, well, no, the board took this under consideration. There was a formal determination made on March 17th.
I mean, I'll make the motion in order to help offset the loss of the solid waste franchise fees as revenues to the parks, to go ahead and raise the, all the recreation programs 10%, and then the athletic facilities, minimal 10%, but review that as soon as possible to maybe increase it even more as well. And then the birthday, that would stay at 10%. And then also, yeah, same thing with the community center as well.
This can be said of the recreation center rentals.
We decided just the rec center. Okay, just the rec center.
And then I want to clarify, does your motion include that those adjustments are scheduled for the next 2 years following? Well,
yes.
Again, that just, I think,
Per
helps.
year, 10%.
It helps,
Yes.
I think it helps us know exactly what to expect, and for our staff to be able to communicate to parents that this is what's coming.
Yes, so 10 years for the next, 10% for the next 3 years for the programs, and then at least 10% for the rec center for the next 3 years, maybe depending on the staff recommendation. All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all right. A roll call, please.
Directors Fardonish,
Aye.
Tyrone. Aye. Logan,
Aye.
Mortensen,
All right,
and Peterson.
All right. And do you mind making a motion about the other items?
Sure, I guess I would just suggest that in the motion, it would be to direct staff to prepare the 26-27 budget as outlined, by items number 1, and 3, and then that items number 4 would be kind of led by the Parks, Recreation and Refuse Committee. Item number 5, broken into 2 separate parts, would be headed up by Fire and Emergency Management Committee. Item number 6 is going to really relate specifically to the Parks and Recreation fundraising efforts, and that will be something that's reviewed regularly by the Parks and Recreation Committee. Item number 7 doesn't require any action other than an embrace, I guess, just that we keep track of, in 3 years or just under 3 years. We'll work to remind the board that you should be setting up an ad hoc committee. The board president would need to establish that.
Okay, I'll make that motion. No, that is
What he
second.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call.
Directors Fardonish,
Aye.
Tyrone. Aye. Logan. Aye. Mortensen
all right.
and Peterson.
All right. Okay. A motion passes 5-0. All right, good. All right, moving on to the next item, which is the 2025-2028 strategic plan update. Are you doing it, Jeff?
So actually, Justin's gonna take the lead on this, and we're gonna bring up, so anyway, the item that's included in your packet is available on the screen. And if there's any changes that are necessary as a result of any discussion, we can make those in real time.
Yeah, that's right. Good evening, board. Here tonight to review the 2025-28 strategic plan. It's rather robust. It's I think a total of 19 different spreadsheets. And so there's a number of objectives and action items. We've made progress in a number of different areas. And so we're trying to track that in the spirit of St. Patrick's Day. We've chosen green tonight.
Not on purpose.
Is that what color that is?
That is.
No, you're more colorblind than I thought. That was gray.
Oh.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
hot pink.
Green, can't you tell?
You'll notice items that are in black are the original strategic plan that was put together earlier last spring, September. There was revisions, updates made that are tracked in blue. And so the green is relevant to the items that we've changed here in March. This update is brought before you 2 times a year in March in preparation, for the most part, for not only communication purposes and letting you know what staff's up to, but also preparation for the budget. And so, and then later again in September. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and begin similarly to last time and just scroll through, starting with finance and administration. There are some significant accomplishments and or progress being made. So we just wanted to make sure that we spend the appropriate amount of time to note these progress and especially get any questions or comments that the board may have. So with, let's see here, with item number 1, update strategic financial policies to better address long-term pension and other post-employment benefit liabilities. So for update policy related to other post-employment benefits, retiree health insurance to address fallen, man, I'm losing my side here. Volatility in trust fund and maintain status as fully funded. And I believe that a new strategy took place earlier this last year to go with a more aggressive strategy. And so then that item is now 100% complete. Any questions about that? No. Okay, and so then B, create policy to address unfunded accrued liability in CalPERS pension plans, as well as how to account for costs, particularly for the Tier 1 miscellaneous plan. So there's some initial research, I believe, that's being accomplished, but relatively, we're still in the kind of infancy on this particular objective. Celebrate Templeton Community Services District 50th anniversary in 2026 with staff, board, and community involvement. Item is on track. It moved to Parks and Recreation. Refuse Committee will be combined with concerts in the park program. And remaining items expected to be included in the 2026-27 budget. Item number 3, determine pros and cons of altering number of regular meetings to 1 month. And that was accomplished, 100% complete. Moved to a board meeting once per month, October 2025. There was limited information to update you all with for item number 4. Number 5, review compensation philosophy. Consider update if warranted. And so I believe that is delayed. It's in progress, but it's still in being worked out, conversations between the consultant that was hired. General Manager, who was the?
Yes,
consultant?
RGS, Regional Governmental Services, but item A or 5A there was something that the committee reviewed back last fall and suggested that it come back to the committee only once the compensation study is done. And it's not complete, and that's why there's a delay.
So can you speak to why it's being delayed?
So
Because this is the same consultant that did the original compensation.
It
study,
is.
Correct?
It is.
Is it the same individual?
No, it is not.
Okay.
It is not. So you might, it's very different reasons. It was delayed also when we did it 6 years ago, but we blame that on COVID and the fact that like most agencies sent their people home and couldn't get information for months, et cetera. Really, we just had, it was slow getting started and then the drafts that we've received so far had a number of errors and corrections that were necessary. So we've sent those back to the consultant. We did get an updated report last week that we think has addressed most of the remaining issues. But I'm waiting to get that confirmed before scheduling this to be finalized.
So are they including the same agencies that
Yes.
were compared in the original?
They are,
compensation study?
except for one of the agencies was very non-cooperative and it took about 5 months to get the information. They don't post their stuff online.
I may have jumped ahead here, because so B has to do with the same study.
So is June 2026, is that when we're anticipating giving the report?
No, that's item A is really this compensation philosophy. That's why I listed that because the committee requested reviewing it after the report was concluded. It's possible you can have that report as soon as next month. That'd be
Oh, okay,
optimistic
okay.
based on what we've worked on recently, but I mean, I think we're close to being done.
All right, I see it. Thank you.
Maybe we could just, because there's a lot to go over here, maybe just, we could just get to we could highlight the ones where we're suggesting the dates have changed. The completion date, not necessarily the percentage of work, but the completion date will have to pivot. And then if the board has any questions about any other ones,
Yeah.
please speak up. We definitely want to make sure you walk away feeling fully updated here. But as an example,
Item B.
page 2B
Yeah.
is one that the date has slid for the reasons I just explained.
Are there any other date changes on item 2? Otherwise, I have a question about page 2.
There are no other date changes on that page.
No.
The first bit.
Okay, on C on page 2, do we have a timeline about when, because I know we had discussed changing office hours, about actually implementing a change, or?
Yeah, we've done some additional work that the committee kind of requested. And I was planning on bringing that back the next time we have it, in April. But that also might coincide with when the compensation report's ready for its initial review.
Great.
Any other questions or comments for page 2?
No.
Page 3 doesn't have any dates. Well, if there's no questions for page 3, we'll go to page 4.
I have a question related to number 2. Anybody has anything before then? So reviewed options with Fire and Emergency Management Committee, learned March 2026 that neighboring agency is not interested in partnership to provide services. I was just wondering if we could get a little bit more clarity around that item.
So yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you highlighted number 2. So yes, last fall we did review with the Fire and Emergency Management Committee, some succession options. At the time we knew that Chief Peterson was, had an upcoming retirement. No final date was set at the time, but we were looking at options. And the committee, we had already kind of put feelers out with the city of Atascadero about would they be interested in inheriting some of those duties in some way for under like a service contract. And might that be a way of saving ourselves the cost of some savings as compared to the cost of a full-time replacement. And I learned about a week and a half ago that no, in fact, the city of Atascadero is not interested in performing that kind of service for us right now. So that alternative doesn't really exist, that partnership.
They have a full-time chief?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We also reviewed with the committee recruiting for a part-time fire chief. The concept of an interim chief was really if we had a gap, like Chief Peterson has stated his intent is to retire in July. If we don't have a new fire chief brought on board, there might be a need to bring on an interim chief to cover any sort of gap. The committee, we discussed some of the pros and cons of looking at part-time coverage, and my concern is really if we limit ourselves to a part-time fire chief, we're really gonna narrow the applicant pool down. Yes, we have employed a part-time chief before, but it has to be kind of a perfect mashup. Essentially, I think we would be attractive to fire personnel who've retired from a non-PERS agency, because if you work for a PERS agency, you can't come back for a permanent position. Or somebody who's employed someone, back from 2014 to 2020, we had part-time fire chiefs. For the most part, those were folks that were full-time employed at a neighboring agency and did this on their off days. And it left some real gaps in our coverage, in our overhead coverage. I think we were fortunate that those gaps didn't likely harm us, but it was not an ideal arrangement. It was a cost savings measure. So it's my recommendation that we look to fill the fire chief's position, knowing we don't have an alternative partnering agency.
Also not an option?
They're not interested. There's some concepts out there about, maybe coming up with more of a structured partnership in the long term, in the big picture, but not really right now. And I guess I want to make it clear, I think any of these agencies would help us in a very, if we were in a pinch, they would help us. But we were really asking Tascadero to make kind of a longer term commitment. Can this work for 3 or 5 years?
Right.
Because solving a problem for 6 months really isn't enough.
Have we started to solicit applications?
No, we're not open yet, but we're working on recruitment materials now.
That was my only question for that.
Ray, was there any other questions? No other dates are revised. Moving on to the next page. Starting with C at the top. There is dates under number 5 that have been changed. So enhance community awareness by expanding public information on the website, specifically fire prevention and education links. December 25th was crossed out. December 26th was noted. 50% ongoing. Started monthly call stat posting on social media fire prevention messages to be posted monthly starting in June 2026. And speaking with the chief, there was there's additional items wanting to list on the website. So there was still work to be done there.
Well, like fireworks.
Or educational information, public outreach.
That's
Statistics.
Yeah, it's for item 5 specifically. It was
specific fire prevention. So like our fireworks ordinance or what would that be?
yeah, that actually.
I did make a page, on the fire department's
Okay.
page that has fireworks, that has the new rules and.
Thank you.
The following, underneath number 6, collaboratively evaluate and improve effectiveness in enforcement of illegal fireworks. And so the completion date was revised August 2026. Evaluate enforcement with Fire and Emergency Service Committee and SLO County Sheriff's Department. And I believe August 2026 was noted. Kind of get through the July 4th holiday and get on the other side of it and be able to really analyze the data. As item B and altogether, a new item altogether. So develop and implement Templeton CSD specific firework enforcement program. And June 26 is the completion date, 50% completed legal framework and first reading of fireworks enforcement ordinance.
It actually did your second reading tonight.
Move on to the next page. If there's no other questions, comments. starting with, item number one, fire station expansion. There's a number of updates that have been revised. And that may have been, largely due to comment and, working through the county, with the county for revisions with in the planning, and the permitting process. Received comments and, submitting in March 2026 for the building permit. If there's any questions or comments, and if none, we can move on to the.
So I think based on the board's direction to the committee, after the fire committee, reviews the alternatives with regards to the permits, I would expect these dates would need to be changed to reflect that.
Fine. After the, that's fine.
Okay, and then on this next page, we have, just item C here, no dates revised. Moving on to the next page, let's see here, no dates have been updated. Questions? I'm not seeing necessarily any dates changed even on the next page. Are there any questions through item number 7C? Is there any questions through that? No? Okay. Moving right along. Item number 1. We come down to item number 2, budget and accomplish action items for repair and rehab. Item A is refurbish and paint restrooms, Evers Sports Parks and Tom German Senior Park. And so we have a new update, April 27th, 25%. We did recently, we had some inspections, some review by someone certified ADA, and reviewed the restrooms. We are going to be discussing those at future committee. We recently toured the Evers restrooms and fields at a committee meeting, and there's plans to do the same at German here in the near future.
Basically, the bottom line is the compliance issues are going to require the projects to be a little more extensive than painting and whatnot in order to improve compliance as a part of the project.
What kind of compliance?
ADA compliance, sorry. We just have a lot of little things like the partition being 2 inches too small, or a toilet being a little bit too close to a wall, and
Super specific.
There's costs.
Any comments, questions? Moving on to the next page, starting with letter D. We have paint, rec center, community center buildings, district office buildings, including repair and replace eaves, wood posts, and handrails. That was revised to December 26th. We did recently tour some of these facilities in Parks Committee, and just outlining project scopes and cost estimates for needed repairs. This scope of work and these items, the costs associated, are being looked at to be captured in the upcoming 26-27 budget. The date isn't necessarily changed, but the letter E, budget and accomplish replacement, repair, rec center, backyard fencing, that was also noted to capture costs. I believe our staff are getting those costs for those fencing repairs earlier this morning. Any other dates on this page? I'm not seeing any other dates revised. If nobody has any questions, we'll move on to
So will we be, on the next page, will we be removing 6A now or editing?
So. Yeah, I would recommend, based on the direction that you provided, to make some edits. We are recruiting for
Part-time.
a part-time role.
Okay.
But I won't fill that role until I have a sense of our draft budget. So, which hopefully we'll have in the next couple of weeks, to ensure that we're gonna be able to afford it. How much time we're gonna be able to afford. Once that's known, we did fill the vacant full-time maintenance worker position.
Yeah.
Then we lost that person, and now we don't think we can afford to maintain the position.
Yeah, so item number 7, dog policies at the parks. That was something that we recently reviewed at a Parks Committee meeting as well, and we got some direction looking into ways to help with public outreach or noticing folks and signage and those sorts of things. So we'll be discussing that at a future committee through Parks and Rec. Evers Park project. So, yeah. Resubmitting to the county yet again, and number of these items that they're delayed, unfortunately.
It has been resubmitted to the county 3 weeks ago, perhaps. We're waiting on the next set of county comments.
Have a party at Evers once they're all approved.
Retirement party. At Johnson Park, that's right.
Any other questions about the project? Okay, we'll move on to item number 1. I don't see any dates on this page. I don't see any revisions. So this is in order. I don't see any dates. Oh, I have an older copy. Great.
I think
They're all related to the.
Yeah, so the big news for item number 2, I'll go off this. For item number 2, we were finally noticed about our draft permit. There's a notice of applicability. We received that. We prepared with, in hand with a consultant, we prepared a response. The Regional Water Control Board now has that response, and there's this kind of, comment period, question and comment period. We're in that right now, advocating for the most advantageous position for the community and for a wastewater treatment plant moving forward. But a number of the items then have been delayed as we had first expected to be much further along in this process. We're fine taking as much time as we need, taking as much time as it takes. But it looks like it's finally starting to move forward. And I would expect by next month, by the month of April, we're gonna have, it's gonna be much further developed, and we're gonna be it's gonna be clear what we're gonna be facing for the next permit for Meadowbrook.
So, okay, for the whole facility. So,
Yeah, it's our waste
Yes,
discharge permit.
yeah, okay, and so are we looking at, is it extensive where they wanna get rid of the pond system?
No, actually, they don't tell you how to accomplish it. They only tell you what to accomplish.
Okay,
It's up to us to figure out how to accomplish it.
okay, all right.
So, but we planned on updating the utilities committee.
There's a lot to discuss there.
Because this was back and forth, like,
Lot done back.
there was items just coming into us today, so it's a real time kind of a situation. But we don't yet have it's just
Not
mentioned,
finalized yet.
we don't yet have a hard copy permit, and actually it looks like there may be quite a few changes
Yeah.
between the draft that we got and when we actually get a permit, and I don't, until that's done deal, I wanna keep as much up in the air as possible, because There were probably some errors with the original draft.
No problem.
So.
Water was in there first.
If you're trying to follow along, the version online, well, the version we're looking at here. Yes,
Yeah, I got you.
okay. Yeah, water in the packet is posted before wastewater, and so if you're trying to follow along, it may be out of order.
Okay, we can keep scrolling down. We can do water. Rows, old rows. You pump column pipe, sort of, this is underneath Platt's Deep. Yeah, so we did rehab Platt's Deep, and unfortunately, shortly after startup, it failed. And we suspect that there was, the connections in the wiring at the motor, we suspect that they were improperly landed. And so it almost looked like it imploded, the wiring. And so the motor's been rewound, the wiring, unfortunately, the company had to come back and remove all of the equipment and then reinstall it. And so today we performed startup at the facility and collected some samples. Hopefully by the end of the week, things are looking in good shape at Platt's, and we're gonna be able to use it, especially with the warm conditions starting. It's early and it's getting warm already. Demand is up.
Was that under warranty when
Yeah.
they had to come back?
Platt's 2, some of these items are Platt's 2 River. We are at 60% plans. Some of the dates were a little optimistic, so some of those dates have been changed, revised, reflect some of the delay. County, okay, the turnout, those items, those dates have been changed. Primarily because us moving forward is somewhat dictated by the county and their progress with the new alignment and turnout over at the Creekside River area. So those dates have all been revised as well.
But the county is always on time. What are you talking about?
Investigate options, I said. So item F, with just, Gary, what's just above that? So Tyler, yeah. Right, I just wanted to point out that we were able to have a meeting with Tyler. Our existing software that we're using for a number of ways. Our assets are already built into Tyler, and we found that there's an upfront cost of about $6,500, $45 about ongoing per year. But that it's more or less, it's a cut and paste our assets directly into this asset management module. This would be a separate module that we would obtain. And it does have that work order system component. It has a lot to offer. It's not limited to just that. There's a lot of benefit to us, to the district, to the community by having this moving forward with this module. It's really fantastic the way where you have Tyler and our assets are already built in to the software. And so it even updates, and you can determine this on whatever interval. You can determine it on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, but it will kind of pull ArcGIS, if you will, and update anything that you've done in the field through GIS. It will automatically update, kind of bring that into your work orders and your asset management, that module. So you can keep it for, archive and kind of keep it for your records and regulatory agency reporting and all of the likes, right? Super. I'm glad that you asked about it. Very interesting. Is there any other question? Provide interim shower locker. This is really was discouraging. We went back hard at findings an option a module kind of trailer, mobile kind of unit in the interim. What's out at the wastewater treatment plant is basically office space and then a big open shop. And there are no other sort of interior HVAC, plumbing sort of rooms or the likes in that kind of shop space. And so we were thinking in the interim, we would be able to bring some sort of an trailer mobile type unit out and be able to and connect it into plumbing, power, and staff would have a place to be able to change out. It's not necessarily in the building, but we have to go through a whole process to be able to get to that place. So this would be something, an effort to take care of the staff's needs and changing out in their uniforms. We've discussed this in the past. They're dealing with chlorine, pesticides, a number of different things that are hazardous. And so then it's just unfortunate when I went back to look at costs that we were looking at in around $30,000. All of those options are gone. And so then the quotes that I've received since are in the $90,000 to $115,000 range for 2 showers, two restroom stalls, and then a kind of a bank of lockers, if you will, was kind of the vision of it. And so we're preparing those costs for our budget moving forward the next 26, 27 budgets. But that was very discouraging. And happy to report we did complete our training matrix as well. We didn't have one out in operations, so that we do have matrix now for folks to be able to sign up, accomplish different trainings and track it. Now we're into wastewater. Thank you. There's a lot of duplication between water and wastewater, so we can. Should we go back over the permit, the draft permit? No, we don't have to go back over. Roll down through.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Yeah, well, I think we've done it.
Oh, that's it.
I think that's, well, if there's any questions or any questions?
I do want to be, obviously we would have to answer questions. I guess I want to make sure that, is this format working for you? Is this, we would like to get some feedback, like, is the way it's being prepared in written form and whatnot effective? And then once we'll post this online so that it's available for any members of the public to view, where we have the strategic plan.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it. Thanks for updating us. Any questions for Justin? Nope. All right. Public, any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Coming back. General Manager.
Okay, just a couple things. I will attempt to be brief. You can go to page. Kidding. Just as Justin just mentioned, we're this little spell right now, and actually it's odd, but we've actually had a very mild winter overall, and our water production started picking up a month ago.
Yeah.
And we're producing water about 1.3 million gallons a day right now. That's like typical for May, not March. So water production's way up, maybe 50% up of a typical early March date, 40-50%, somewhere in that line of work. Just keep that in mind. We've had to bring on some additional assets. We have a couple of critical wells that are down right now. We're looking to, as Justin mentioned, get them back in service. We also mentioned the Regional Water Quality Control Board correspondence, and I just want to highlight that it's a big deal. The Regional Water Quality Control Board asked us approximately 3 years ago to apply to be enrolled in the new permit. It was not really a voluntary. I mean, they requested it, but they would have eventually mandated it. They took, we've been waiting for quite a while now for them to issue the permit. We got a draft permit about 5 weeks ago, and last week submitted our comments back on it. And then just today, there's been correspondence back and forth about how they're addressing those comments. We could get a permit any day, but there were some extensive comments that we had that we want to make sure get addressed appropriately. in the new permit. And once we have the new permit, that's when things will get started. That's when there'll be a requirement that within 1 year, we apply for a time order extension, et cetera. All of these things to begin to put in place, the plans to eventually comply. There's an acknowledgement that just because the new permit might be issued in May of this year, that we are not in a position to comply with those requirements, right now. But there'll be a schedule to achieve compliance. And then finally, I will be gone, beginning this Friday and all of next week. I'm traveling to Colorado. Back the 20, I'll be back at work on the 30th. But generally available.
Great, thank you. Any questions for general manager?
No, just good luck with TSA.
I might not be back on the 30th. I don't know.
Public, any questions? Okay, coming back, committee reports, we have several, GSA, that's a meeting, met on, February 18th. The main thing from that is that, it's the annual report time, so actually in just a week or two, we are gonna hear all the comments for the annual report and then hopefully approve the annual report. But at the same time of the annual report that we're doing for Atascadero Basin, we have to update our main plan that it's already been 5 years, so we it either has to be redone or updated because we're in such a good shape that they think that we should be able to update it. It's gonna cost less money if we have to update it. The annual report costs about $50,000. We have to do that every year, but not for us, for the whole thing, everyone.
We pay about 20% of it.
20% of that. The update on the plan is probably, they think it's gonna be 150 to 200,000. So we'll see where that comes in. But we have to do this even though we low priority,
Wait, an
so.
update of the plan is 150 to 200,000?
That's what they're estimating. We haven't got a full estimate on it, but that's what they say. I think it was a Paso Robles, they said was gonna be like 300,000, and it's the same contract. TAG, I went ahead, I attended, and with TAG, I gave the update. The main thing for us, I guess, as far as us concerned, that TAG voted against the gas station, or the gas at Vineyard. Gas station had come back with updated facade and updated, traffic flow and things like that, but still TAG voted against it. So I guess it goes to the planning commission and see where what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, TAG just issues a recommendation.
Yeah. Next, any questions on the fire and emergency committee management? Okay, public, no. Parks and Recreation and Refuse Committee, any questions? All right, that's committee reports, activity updates, so I'm just gonna combine them all together. Engineering, finance, fire and emergency services, parks, recreation, solid waste, utilities, CHP, new laws of 2026 and IWMA 2025. Board, any questions on any of those?
So I do have a question on the new laws, one of which was the cleaning, it's SB 827. And so am I to assume that CSDA is going to be facilitating the necessary trainings? Do we have a date as to when that's gonna be?
So they actually,
They just did a live one.
March 4th.
Last week. Yeah, and they were gonna have
I wasn't able to-
they're gonna have an on-demand one. I was waiting for on-demand, I was gonna send it out to.
They say it'll take a couple of weeks.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
All right, any questions on any of those? All right. Director's report and or comments, anything? No? All right, okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, guys.